Folks, I'm Ethan Diamandis with Oddshark. I am joined yet again by a special guest, longtime MMA personality and commentator. He's the current voice of the UFC. He is Jon Anik. Jon, my man, good to see you. How are you?
It's good to see you, man. I'm great. Always good to be here with Oddshark and you. It's interesting how Oddshark has a host who's like a quarter century my junior, right? Ethan, look at this kid, right? 10 out of 10 in the looks department. The kid was born in the year 2000, right? So I got the gray/white beard going on. We're looking like the oldest man in the room today, but it's always good to see you and be here.
Man, you flatter me, but your experience is what we're leaning on here. Jon, man, fight fans all around the world are crazy. We know they're crazy, but there's something about the English fans that really sets them apart. I mean, they're nuts, whether it's the chanting or just hometown loyalty in general. I mean, to you, Jon, where do UK fans rank among all MMA fans in the world?
As good as it gets. I have said repeatedly, the loudest crowd I ever heard was at UFC 113 when Shogun Rua fought Lyoto Machida in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So I have to acknowledge that live event atmosphere as just otherworldly and the loudest I've experienced. But yes, Brazil, Australia, all these different nations can lay claim to being the loudest, best MMA fans. On and on I could go. But England, it just hits different. And at least for me, I haven't had a chance over the last decade, as you and I think, have talked about before, to call a lot of fights in England, 2 recent pay-per-views. But before that, I hadn't done a lot of those fight nights over there. So the fans are rabid. They absolutely love this stuff. And as you well know, this time around, Leon Edwards is probably going to make the walk at 5:30 a.m. local time in Manchester. So that's another variable that you throw into the equation. I just can't wait to get around these people. You know, I wish I could jump into the mosh pit that will be the crowd in Manchester come July 27th.
Yeah, fans are going to be wired at that time. To stay awake, they're going to have to be wired. And hopefully the action in the octagon will match the energy in the crowd. The main event, as you mentioned, welterweight championship between Leon Rocky Edwards and Belal, remember the name, Muhammad. Rocky's minus 210 favorite, Muhammad, the plus 175 underdog. Now, people forget it. I almost forgot it myself if it wasn't for the 2 in the title of the pay-per-view that these guys have faced each other before. Yeah. Early 2021, the fight ended early in round 2 due to an accidental eye poke. Muhammad on the receiving end of that. It wasn't much, Jon, wasn't much of a fight. Those guys were still hot at the time, perhaps not as hot as they are now. But what did that fight teach you, if anything, about how those 2 guys will match up next weekend?
Well, I can't suggest to you that I would throw it out completely because Leon Edwards did get a lot of things done in the striking department. Belal Muhammad certainly showed off his toughness, which we have seen in any of his fights in which he has faced adversity. But, you know, largely I throw it out in part because it was short notice for Belal Muhammad. Leon Edwards was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev, so he was not training for Belal. It was at the UFC Apex. It was a global pandemic climate, and it ended with one of the worst eye pokes that I have ever seen. And if you know Belal Muhammad and you know his toughness, the way he eats leg kicks, the way he eats training camps, you know, he was crying in part, you know, as he was writhing in pain on the base of the octagon. He was crying in part because the opportunity had slipped through his fingertips, but also because of just the pain of the eye poke. So I think both guys have leveled up to such a significant extent, Ethan, that it's hard to lean too much into that. Leon Edwards, certainly, as Teddy Atlas and others suggest, when you win the championship, you improve 20 to 30%. I subscribe to a lot of that theory. And Leon Edwards has now stacked a couple of training camps and then successive wins against Kamaru Usman a second time and then Colby Covington. So Leon Edwards, to me, is the best welterweight in the world until proven otherwise. I know Belal doesn't think he's the toughest matchup for him. I do believe that to be true. Belal has leveled up significantly in all areas, mental, emotional, physical. Fascinating fight. And I can't wait to get to Manchester and, you know, to see if Belal can do it, to see if Leon can be as good as, you know, me and others think he is.
Yeah, Leon is definitely polished and certainly the best welterweight in the world right now. If there's one criticism of him, though, Jon, it's that he doesn't necessarily always finish his fights. Now, we know Muhammad doesn't necessarily have that finishing ability either. Of course, he famously has 0 UFC knockdowns. He does have 1 TKO stoppage in the UFC. So it's going to be, this fight will be chalked to go the distance. But fight fans and savvy bettors are always going to want that plus money avenue to a finish. Jon, in your mind, how do we see a finish happen in this main event? What factors do you think will play into that outcome?
So Leon Edwards is a fantastic striker and manager of distance. So would it be out of the realm of possibility for him to land one of his patented head kicks at one point in time and knock out Belal Muhammad, despite the fact that Muhammad has proven very difficult to put away, even with that weapon? I mean, if you look back to Belal Muhammad's last loss in 2019 to Jeff Neal, the toughness is just otherworldly. The ability to recover from strikes that make you sort of drunk driving on your feet. It's truly next level out of Belal. So I do believe in his chin and his durability, and I think it's only gotten better because he's just stronger and thicker than he was back in 2019 and back when he absorbed that head kick against Leon the first time. But I think you and I would both agree that if we wake up, or I guess it'll be the middle of the morning, but if we go into our Sunday and Leon Edwards has won this fight by head kick knockout, I don't think that either one of us will be surprised. As far as Belal Muhammad, I think it would be more a war of attrition, just if he is able to take Leon Edwards down, not only take him down, but bully him in the clinch a little bit and do some damage there, do some damage on the feet ideally, but get the fight to the ground, keep Leon there enough of a time to do appreciable damage with elbows, loose elbows, significant strikes on the ground. Maybe there could be a TKO stoppage there. So I do see finishing ability on both sides, but I can understand why, over 4.5 rounds is going to be the chalk play or the chalk side.
I think I'll be riding with Leon in this fight, and I think this fight will, extend his legacy a little bit and just show how polished he is right now. Let's say he wins in a decisive fashion, whether it's a knockout, head kick knockout, like you said, or a really, really clean decision. I mean, could we see Edwards creep higher than fourth on this pound for pound list? I think, it's a conversation at least, but does he deserve to be higher than Jon Jones, Alex Pereira, Islam Makhachev? Could he creep up there, you think, Jon?
Well, it's hard. I don't know what your criteria is. My criteria might be different than the people that actually matter when it comes to these rankings. Largely, I like to look at two things. I like to look at those middle weight classes, 45, 55, 70, that are 35 athletes deep on any given Saturday night. Those guys are competitive against the top 10. And then activity, right? I mean, not to suggest that you've got to successfully defend your belt 3 times in a year, but you've got to at least be, championing the cause twice a year, I think, to be the pound for pound king. So for me, it's Islam Makhachev. And, I'd love to see Leon turn it around if he wins here and fight in November or December. And if he's able to string 2 wins together here to close out the year, there's no reason he couldn't be the pound for pound king. But largely the pound for pound conversation for me kind of falls on deaf ears because I think all the people that are even ingesting this have their own different criteria. But for me, it's Islam Makhachev. And if you're only as good as your last performance, for him to find that takedown and that submission late against Dustin Poirier, that's the pound for pound king if I need to come up with one today.
Yeah, Islam definitely is the pound for pound king. Any interest, Jon, in potentially seeing Leon Edwards fight Islam Makhachev at one point?
Well, I mean, if Team Edwards has interest, right, monetarily and otherwise, then I'm a fan of Team Edwards and Tim Simpson and everybody else. But no, I mean, the welterweight division is nothing but cleared out, right? The cupboard is not bare whatsoever. If you were to ask me who would be next for Leon Edwards if he head kicked Belal Muhammad out of this fight in round 1, I could come up with 4 or 5 different names right now. So, I don't want to see, Islam Makhachev cut the line. The cupboard's not bare at 55 for him. I don't necessarily need to see mandatory 3 title defenses for a champion to get the division or, to go belt chasing in a second division. But, I think for Islam and Leon, with respect, there's work to do in both of their divisions. And, I'll call it if it's a fight that's made, but I'm not always, front of the line for the super fight.
Right on. We're all very, very excited for this Manchester pay-per-view event on July 27th. Your man, Jon Anik, will be on the call. Jon, you're the best dude. Thanks for doing this. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, buddy. Talk to you in a couple weeks.